Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome virtually to the Palais des Nations in Geneva. My name is David Chikvaidze. I'm Chef de Cabinet of the Director General of the United Nations Office at Geneva, commonly referred to by its acronym UNOG. And I have the daunting privilege of chairing the opening session of this joint conference of UNOG and the World Academy of Art and Science, Global Leadership for the 21st Century. This is the culmination of a one-year joint project to develop cross-sectoral strategies for addressing current global leadership challenges. At the outset, I wish to recognize the Director General of UNOG, our host and my boss, Ms. Tatiana Valovaya, who will shortly officially open our conference. Excuse me. It is my pleasure to also recognize the other co-chair of our conference, and without much exaggeration, truly the father of this project, President and CEO of the World Academy of Art and Science, Mr. Garry Jacobs. The second wave of COVID around the world made it impossible for Garry Jacobs to travel to Geneva, as it did for many other participants. So the entire event today and tomorrow is virtual. Let me note here that another victim of this situation is multilingualism, which we always try to uphold as a minimum with respect to the second working language of the UN, French. But it proved impossible, so the entire conference will be in English. The Director General of UNOG and the President of WAAS are pleased and honored to be joined for this opening session by two outstanding women leaders, former President of the Swiss Confederation, Ms. Micheline Calmy-Rey, and former President of Latvia, Ms. Vaira V Freyberga. Who better than two democratic former heads of state to project into the future the requirements for dynamic and efficient global leadership for the rest of the 21st century, and together with the Director General of UNOG and the President of the World Academy to set the tone for this conference. I would also like to warmly welcome the participants of our conference, diplomats, UN colleagues, civil society actors, journalists, members of the academic institutions, and youth representatives. Over 700 persons registered for this conference, and we look forward to your active participation. My appreciation also goes to our main partners, among them the Nizami Ganjavi International Center, the Club of Rome, the Global Security Institute, and many, many others. We're gratified that some of the brightest minds in science, diplomacy, civic action, and other fields accepted our invitation to discuss how to fill the gaps in global leadership at this critical juncture in human history. Without taking up more time, I wish to present our first speaker, the Director General of UNOG, Undersecretary General Tatiana Valovaya. You are the first woman to occupy this position. An academic and practitioner yourself, you've been a leader in multilateralism for years. International Geneva has come to appreciate your skillful leadership of UN Geneva, facilitating diplomacy in the 21st century, while at the same time navigating us through the impact of the pandemic. No mean achievement. Director General, it's my pleasure to invite you to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, welcome to the Palais des Nations in Geneva, though virtually. It's a place where diverse expertise from all fields is gathered, where international organizations, governments, civil society, academia, and private sector closely work together, and where lots of bright ideas flourish. It is a great pleasure to co-host such a high-profile event which combines a wealth of knowledge from all disciplines. I would like to thank our numerous partners and experts whose contributions, papers, and panel discussions laid the intellectual foundation of this conference. I would like to thank our esteemed co-host, the World Academy of Art and Science, for this excellent collaboration, and personally, the President and Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Garry Jacobs, and his fantastic team. The World Academy of Art and Science was founded in 1960 by outstanding scientists who wanted to harness their knowledge for the good of all and who were concerned about the devastating effects that the misuse of science could have. Academy fellows are pioneers in their fields and strong advocates for issues such as democracy and global governance, international security and peace, climate change, global health, education, and equality. Our partnership with the World Academy of Art and Science has been a long and successful one, born out of the deep desire to better utilize the findings of science to jointly address global social challenges. Our work has many overlapping areas, and it was only a logical step to let it culminate in a great project like this. When we started this project over a year ago, the task we gave ourselves and our partners was already complex: to develop global leadership strategies for social progress in the 21st century. The project is born of the complex nexus of global challenges that we are facing today: a devastating climate crisis, armed conflicts around the world, dire poverty and rampant global inequalities, deep global mistrust and trade disputes, as well as repeated attacks on the media. The seeming inability of the international community to re-engage and work together to stem these global challenges has revealed a vacuum of meaningful global leadership. And these challenges were already evident before a global pandemic swept across our planet. At that time, we could not foresee how a microscopic virus would reinforce the importance of our work. UN Secretary General Guterres evoked a powerful image when he compared the pandemic to an X-ray that laid bare existing fragilities in our societies. Global change is continuing at record speed and complexity, increasing uncertainty, especially for the most vulnerable. We are faced with urgent ecological challenges, and we are lagging behind in the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Our challenges are coupled with a dangerous retreat from multilateralism that renders conventional leadership models ineffective or even potentially obsolete. We need more active global leadership and transformative strategies for our future. The United Nations has started a global spanning discussion this year. On the occasion of our 75th anniversary, we reached out to the people through dialogues, and several of them were held in virtual and hybrid forums here in Geneva, and surveys. And we asked citizens what kind of future and what kind of the United Nations they want and need. The majority of the respondents see the value of cooperation to solve the challenges ahead of us, from global health to climate change and conflicts. An important priority for them is to rethink our social and economic system, to build a more inclusive version of it, and to rebalance the relationship between economic growth, environment, and public priorities. For the vast majority of people, solidarity, multilateralism, and international cooperation are the most important tools for this work. Today's conference, therefore, comes at an ideal time, and the result of the UN 75 initiative will be an important impulse for the ongoing discussions. The aim of the next 2 days is to go beyond assessing the status quo and to articulate active strategies for sustainable global leadership, including for the workings of the United Nations and its partners. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I am looking forward to many inspiring discussions with brilliant ideas for a better future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Director General, for your welcome and your perspective on the synergies needed to reach our goal. It is now my privilege to turn to Ms. Micheline Calmy-Rey, former President and former Foreign Minister of Switzerland, who has long been at the forefront of multilateralism, diplomacy, human rights, gender, and intercultural dialogue. Today, as Professor of the Global Studies Institute of the University of Geneva, you form young minds and continue to actively support democratic leadership. You are our major resident asset in Geneva, and we're very pleased that you could join us today. is my privilege to invite you to speak.
Merci. Madame la Directrice Générale, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the theme of our conference is leadership in the 21st century, as well as the future of multilateralism. The two issues are indeed linked. The erosion of multilateralism is one of the major challenges facing the international community. The erosion began before Donald Trump came to power, with the emergence of a post-Soviet world. And it will not stop with Joe Biden coming to power. The idea of state sovereignty is dominant. So-called illiberal democracies are setting the standard. International relations are the preserve of strong men talking among themselves. Yet it would be wrong to signal the end of multilateralism. Forced to open up to the private sector and non-governmental organizations, multilateralism is being transformed and has even achieved several successes. For example, with the Paris Climate Agreement, the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, or the Vaccine Alliance. There is no alternative to international cooperation for solving global problems. This makes me confident in the future of the specialized organization that form the bedrock of international Geneva. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, we are transitioning from one world to another. In past centuries, states largely dominated international relations, but today they no longer enjoy this monopoly. From a political point of view, the role of international organizations, as well as that of other actors, has grown in importance. For example, it is impossible to ignore that multinational companies exercise their influence on a global size. And we have to acknowledge that civil society is no longer ready to accept the domination of states in international relations. By taking full advantage of information technology, civil society has gone global. It is no longer content to operate within national borders. It exploits social networks and has acquired sufficient power to shake up governments. The efforts of certain states to control social networks underline the growing importance of transnational civil society. Transitioning from a state that dominates to a state that interacts and cooperates constitutes a major change. It modifies decision-making structures and compels us to design a new global architecture, a more plural vision of governance. We have entered a polycentric world where local, national, regional, and global processes are interlinked. In an interconnected world, states make decisions not only for their own people, but also for others. And this vision gives importance not only to states, but also to local governments, multilateral agencies, transnational actors, business forums, non-governmental organizations, civil society groups, human rights, and advocacy groups. And we need to work in an interdisciplinary and holistic manner. International governance remains fragmented, but we face global challenges and major efforts and institutional innovations are needed to put policy changes into practice, both in national governments and in multinational organizations. But at the end of the day, we have to acknowledge that the effects of international governance are limited. Much of the debate on global governance addresses the international level. In political rhetoric, much emphasis is placed on the importance of international cooperation. But there remains a fundamental need to reform multilateral organizations into global organizations. We have the technology, the knowledge, and the financial means to tackle current global challenges. But to succeed, we have to balance the different interests involved. And this in turn cannot be done without rethinking the foundation of international governance. No higher authority will ask us for proof of today's global challenges, nor will it impose restrictions on us as to how we meet them. Who defines the nature of the risk and problems we are facing? Who is responsible? How can we make sure that everyone benefits from development? Since the Rio conference, some progress have been made in reconciling economy, society, and environment. But no assembly has managed to take the lead and launch the necessary global reorientation. International governance remains fragmented and its effects are limited. At the same time, the following crucial needs persist: a political authority or structure able to set a sustainability agenda at a global level. The need of a transnational democracy at a global level, that means a profound reform of international organizations. A political platform that attracts states, the economy and civil society, not just a forum for debate, but as a place for action. An organization able to mobilize resources and coordinate their use. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, never before has humanity been linked together as strongly in a community of risk and of fate. In our globalized, interdependent world, we have to find ways together towards more sustainability and more justice. Thank you for attention.
Thank you very much, Madam President, for these enriching insights into multilateralism, governance, and advancing global leadership for the 21st century. I now have the privilege to invite our next renowned speaker, who has also had a distinguished career in politics serving her country. Ms. Vaida V Freyberga, you served as the 6th president of Latvia from 1999 to 2007, the first woman to hold this post. Former UN Secretary General, the late Kofi Annan, named you his special envoy on United Nations reform. Today, as a member of and former president of the Club de Madrid and co-chair of the Nizami Ganjavi International Center, you continue to advocate for the ones left behind, as well as democratic leadership and effective global governance. It is my pleasure to invite you to speak, Madam.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, may I start by congratulations to all who have organized this conference. It seems to me that not just the 75th anniversary of the foundation of the United Nations, but the current world situation make it amply clear to everybody that leadership, and particularly global leadership, is very much needed. And at the same time, what we see in the public media, and that is what I'd like to address in these introductory remarks, there's a singular lack of faith in leadership. We see two very contradictory movements. On the one hand, everybody clamors for leadership, and we in this conference are among the most prominent to do so. And by the way, congratulations to the World Academy of Art and Science and its leader, Dr. Garry Jacobs. It was his idea to convince United Nations in Geneva to undertake this year-long program on studying leadership. Leadership is seen in a variety of different ways. Throughout history, it has been, as Madame Calmy-Rey pointed out, a matter of strong men talking to each other and deciding events, or more often than that, strong men fighting each other and their armies to see who could kill more on the other side, occupy territory, acquire resources, acquire power. And today, if we look around in the world among the members of the United Nations, we see a great many countries still where you have a strong leader who either legitimately elected or by changing the constitution has established themselves as a very strong leader at the top of a strong hierarchy, a vertical of power, where decisions are absolutely and without objection taken at the very top. And then the vertical of power lets them filter down, and the orders and the decisions are transmitted to those lower in the hierarchy. Everybody has a place in the hierarchy. They have a certain degree of autonomy. They have a certain amount of degrees of freedom in their actions, but the vertical of power is the most important. Then you have the, if you like, the contrary model, which is that of representative democracy. But in real life, of course, it is not so simple. Never is a vertical of power so fully established and strong that it does not have deviations from the orders from above, except for brief periods such as the Stalin's and Lenin's reign of terror, when by absolute brutal terror, or in Nazi Germany, for a brief period, absolute authority from above could be maintained. Representative democracy, on the other hand, delegates leadership responsibilities, both responsibilities and initiatives, by electing its elected representatives. But no later than yesterday, I was reading somebody in the media having an interesting essay about how, in their opinion, representative democracy was not doing the job. In fact, was not being done because representatives that have been gained their positions through elections had lost the trust of the populations, had lost the respect of the media, were not anymore able to do what their constitutions had meant them to do. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is an extraordinarily serious complaint to make to representative democracy. Because when we talk about global leadership, when we talk about multilateralism, we are talking about representative democracy on a world scale. And if within any country, even a small country, the citizens cannot accept the very basic principles of what representative democracy is all about, how can we possibly hope to have at the level of the United Nations, at whatever level of global governance, a respect for the decisions taken, a respect for the persons in a position of responsibility, and most of all, respect in the ideas that they represent. And this is where I think it is so important for this particular conference to be co-organized with the World Academy of Art and Science, because we do, in this day and age, rely very heavily on expert opinion. We are deluged by masses of information and by equally vast masses of disinformation. How does the ordinary citizen sift through it? How does the ordinary citizen know whom to choose as their representative, whom to support as a leader of thought or of action? We are faced with a need for understanding, for analysis, for the gathering of facts, for interpretation, for a placing in context. All of that is the privilege of the scientific method. And this is why scientists of all ilk, and not just nuclear scientists and astrophysicists and biochemists, but humanists and philosophers and trained minds in general, are needed to feed into the public domain clear ideas, well-argumented ideas, ideas supported by evidence, ideas verified by a contact and checks with reality. At the same time, what we need is a renewed confidence in the representative democracy, in the sense that not everybody can do everything. We cannot have just civil society ruling a country. We cannot have representatives of interest groups all by themselves take over government. I know this from my current experience of the Lancet COVID-19 experts group, where I am co-chair of a subgroup about those who have been the most affected by the pandemic. And in our debates, it's very interesting. What we are finding is that somebody who is an expert and who has been working with gender inequality tells us our report should see everything through the lens of gender differences. Somebody else has been working with children, and they will tell you the children are the most vulnerable of all groups possible. They are our future. Without them, we are lost. we should present everything through the lens of children. Then we have those who talk about the refugees and the displaced, and some even remember about the aged who are actually the ones in this particular case hit the most heavily by this pandemic. And what happens? We have to have a common view that brings everybody together. We must have not just a hierarchical, a vertical of responsibility and power, but a matrix, a complex matrix into which we have to feed the different, if you like, silos of information and of need and of necessity, but we cannot allow them to remain silos. They must be interconnected like the neural networks in our brains. Each network is connected to an incredible multiplicity of other networks. So ladies and gentlemen, it is in that perspective of a matrix of needs, of necessities, of ideas presented, tentative ideas to be tested and to implemented, that we should be looking at the world. And it is a system where politicians, elected representatives have their place. And when they are found to be wanting in their inability to face up to reality, in their inability to accept the facts on the ground, in their inability to take significantly proven advice from their advisors, then hopefully, not always, the population will ask for them to be replaced by others. But international, supranational organizations like the United Nations should be open to input from the nation states that have been at the basis of their foundation and their representatives. But thank you very much, United Nations, for all that you have done with all the agencies that you have that try and bring together in a complex and useful matrix all the other branches of society, including civil society, interest groups, those who are definitely left behind, and their possibility to have their voices heard. Thank you very much for what you do. And ladies and gentlemen, I wish you a very successful and fruitful conference.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Thank you for your kind words toward the United Nations, a very rare commodity these days. But mostly, especially thank you for your profound observations, which provide an important basis for the forthcoming discussions. I'd now like to turn to Garry Jacobs, President and CEO of the World Academy, and our esteemed co-host. Besides his titles, the best way to describe Garry is through his work. I'm only slightly exaggerating when I say that Garry himself is an embodiment of a leader in the 21st century. In his work, he is focusing on new paradigms and strategies in fields as diverse as governance, economy, business, education, international security, etc. Garry, it's my pleasure to invite you to speak. Thank you.
David, thank you so much. And my thanks to the Director General and to all your colleagues at the UNOG for making this such a meaningful and enjoyable experience. I've come to get great admiration for the dedication of the team in Geneva and a much greater appreciation of the challenges that you face in negotiating not only the complexities of the world, but the many stakeholders and masters and owners and claimants to the work of the United Nations. I'd like to speak just very briefly about the context in which this project is taking place and what we hope to get out of it. It's hard to even remember back to the end of the Cold War now and how exhilarated and exuberant we were in hopes of nuclear disarmament and world trade, the founding of the internet, the growth of regional governance, especially in Europe. And then with, of course, we had our problems, but still the future in the 21st century looked to be something very much looking forward to. And then following 2008, we seem to have hit a bump and a curve and seem to have been going in the other direction. And already several of the speakers have alluded to where we seem to be heading from an actual retreat from much of the progress that we've been making, a retreat from democracy to autocracy, a retreat from our principles of global free trade, from regional cooperation. We've still got Brexit right on the agenda, a loss of faith in our institutions at all levels, both at the international level, at the national level, our media, even the credibility of science. And all of this leading to the idea that even after the remarkable decision in 2015 to adopt the Sustainable Development Goals, to try to take the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and embody it in actual implementation and achieve it, we seem to be going in the other direction. And that led us to, in our discussions, lengthy discussions and partnership with the UN, to come up with this proposal on the principle that in spite of the difficulties and not minimizing the opposition and the resistance to them, that there must be something we can do that will energize progress and move us beyond the limitation, the barriers, and the obstructions that are in the way. And that's what we coined this phrase, catalytic strategies. Catalytic strategies that would not solve all our problems at once, would not be comprehensive solutions, but would show us with the right type of leadership, not just leadership of people, but leadership of organizations and leadership of ideas and leadership of the right types of systems and measures and movements and networks, that we could in fact find the way to lead ourselves forward during this period. And then the pandemic came, and as if we didn't have enough on our agenda before then. And strangely, we conducted a meeting 6 months ago of about 300 experts online with UNOG. And it was strange that in spite of being right in the middle of this very difficult times, how much hope there was, that the pandemic also demonstrated to us that if we wanted to change, we really could change. If we wanted to make a breakthrough in areas that we found it very difficult, whether it's in education or in healthcare priorities or even in global finance, that we could do something that we hadn't been able to do for decades or even more. And this is the premise from which we start. What we are going to discuss during this conference, we're not going to attempt to deal with all of the issues or all of the solutions that are necessary. What we are going to try to do is to point out that there really are things we can do to move ahead. In the conference, we're going to have 10 sessions focusing on critical issues. We're going to look at the problems of food security, which have been magnified tremendously by the pandemic, and rightly drawing attention to the phenomenal work of World Food Program in addressing critical food conditions and hunger conditions. We're going to look at the rising problem of unemployment, which by projections is likely to get much worse before it gets better. We're going to look at the problem of climate change and the need for a planetary plan to really push us through, because we're far behind the targets that we were planning on. We're going to look at the problem of education, especially the higher education, because all the projections are that we're getting further and further behind in our goals of trying to provide quality education to all who seek it and all who need it. And the pandemic has only aggravated those problems by closing down our schools over the world, all over the world. We're going to look at the issue of finance and how much money we really need to implement these SDGs and all of the problems we have, but what's going on, the positive changes that are going on, and the opportunities both for public finance and private finance that can really make a difference. And you're going to hear some very encouraging research that's being done and trends that are unfolding. We're going to look at the critical challenge that we have in implementing the SDGs of how do we go from formulation of goals and ideas to effective policies and strategies and implementation? How do we close the gap between the research and the action, or between the different disciplines, each looking at the problem from a different perspective? We're going to look at some interesting ideas on how we could build trust, greater trust in the multilateral system, and trust in the media, especially the press, which, as we have seen recently, is so critical, one way or the other, to the functioning of democratic societies. And very importantly, we're going to look at the role of youth and youth networks, and how can we mobilize the voice of global society, we, the people? How can we, rather than going only through our national governments, which we know are not that representative a lot of the time, how can we get a direct voice for global society in making real change to our multilateral system? And all of this under an umbrella of looking at not one or other independent areas, but looking, all of these are aspects of human security. And the UN 75 report, which the Director General mentioned, one of the voices was clear. The people are interested not just in national security, they're interested in all these dimensions of security, and we've got to find an integrated way of conceptualizing and acting on them together. We're here not with all the solutions. We're here with some, what we think are very valuable ideas, proposals that have come not just from the Academy and from UNOG, but about 70 different partner organizations who have been involved in this partnership, for which we're very grateful, to whom we're very grateful. And what we've come here before is not to pronounce the answers, but to debate, to discuss, to project possibilities and hear from a group of wonderful experts. And then we will go back and formulate again from what we've heard, have some further meetings, and finally come back with final recommendations of the project. So thank you all for coming, and thank you, David, for your gracious hosting. We look forward to the program.
Thank you very much, Garry Jacobs, President Vike-Freiberga, President Calmy-Rey, and Director General Valovaya, for this excellent setting of the tone for the conference. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now start with the thematic tracks of the conference in accordance with the program that you all have. The moderators of the various thematic panels that follow have no less of a daunting task than me, perhaps even more so, in managing the time and ensuring the richest possible debate in the limited time allotted for each panel, which I certainly failed to do since we have run over our time. I wish you all fruitful discussions and invite the moderator of the first session on human security and peace building, Mr. Jonathan Granoff, to take over. Thank you very much.